Well, to quote Dan Rayfield, the Oregon Attorney General, a federal judge's order late on Saturday blocking Donald Trump and the Trump administration from taking over the Oregon National Guard under the false pretense that there is some sort of insurrection or rebellion going on in Portland, which there is not a minor procedural point for the president to work around like my 14-year-old does when he doesn't like my answers, because we have an update. I was going to make this hot take all about, for starting Monday morning, the order by Judge Immergut, who ruled against the Trump administration, much the way that her brethren, Judge Breyer in California did, about the California National Guard. But now we've got the California National Guard being sent by Donald Trump like a 14-year-old, no, a 9-year-old, to Oregon because Donald Trump doesn't like the order of the federal judge, which prevented him from taking over the Oregon National Guard. So now Oregon is going to be amending its complaint. Donald Trump's already taken an appeal to the Ninth Circuit, the same Ninth Circuit that's already made rulings about the California takeover. So Donald Trump is doubling and tripling down, and it's coming to a head in Oregon. He picked the wrong judge for this, although she was not the original judge for this case. The original judge, Michael Simon, set a very quick briefing schedule, but then after a phone conference with the parties, decided to recuse himself because he's married to a Democratic representative in Congress, Representative Suzanne Bonamici. So he leaves, and we get Immergut. Now, Immergut, at first blush, we were like, well, it's a Trump appointee, but it's a Trump appointee from the first term, the first administration. And when you look at her history, you will understand why Judge Immergut ruled against the Trump administration, because of the types of jobs that she has held. She's been the district attorney in the county for Portland, Oregon. She's worked closely with local law enforcement. She's been a DA. She's been a U.S. attorney. She's been the acting U.S. attorney for Portland, all before she became a federal judge. So let's just say she's a little bit partial to Portland and the county that which it is in, and their abilities to defend federal property. And she lives in and around Portland, and she realizes that Donald Trump declaring that there is a war and a war-ravaged Portland is absolute nonsense. So now I'm going to tell you about the order, then tell you about Donald Trump trying to do a circumvention around the order and what I think is going to happen next in the next 24 to 48 hours. You're here on Legal AF on Monday. I'm getting my voice back. I appreciate you bearing with me. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute and hit the free subscribe button. So we've got a 31-page order by Judge Immergut. She actually thought that Judge Breyer in San Francisco, she agreed with most of his analysis when he handled the case that was almost identical about the takeover in California. And in particular, she found that in order to take over a National Guard, to federalize, to commandeer a National Guard, a president has to be able to have determined that there is an insurrection or a rebellion, or he has the inability to execute his laws by using regular forces. And the judge, after listening to testimony and reading affidavits, said, I don't think that's a problem. There was one federal officer who was attacked. He used a stun gun, disabled the person, and that's it. Everything else has been like clashes between anti-Trump and pro-Trump forces, not involving ICE or federal facilities. So there's nothing going on the ground that would warrant a takeover. And the judge also noted after she was done saying the county prosecutor, she didn't say this next part, that I used to be the county prosecutor, the DA's office, the federal prosecutors, the law enforcement on the ground, all got this under control. And she said, and Donald Trump was told that by the governor of the state, Tina Kotek, in a conversation. So this is how she, on page 30 of her order, which sort of summarizes this. If you read if you only had to read 2 pages, and I'll post this up on Legal AF Substack, it would be for me pages 2 and pages 30. On page 2, Judge Immergut writes that this case involves the intersection, you knew I was going to like it already, of 3 of the most fundamental principles in our constitutional democracy: The first concerns the relationship between the federal government and the states, and that's dictated by the Constitution and particularly the 10th Amendment, which gives to the states all powers not reposited in the federal government. The second concerns the relationship between the United States Armed Forces and domestic law enforcement. In other words, we don't need the military doing law enforcement. They're not allowed to do law enforcement under the Posse Comitatus Act. Let the local law enforcement do their job. The third, the judge writes, concerns the proper role of the judicial branch in ensuring that the executive branch complies with the laws and limitations by the legislative branch. Whether we choose to follow what the Constitution mandates with respect to these three relationships goes to the heart of what it means to live under the rule of law in the United States. On page 30, she writes, after she issues the temporary restraining order blocking the takeover, Judge Immergut says, this country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs. That tradition has deep roots in our history and found early expression, for example, in the constitutional provisions for civilian control of the military. That's why we have to watch Pete Hegseth, off the Fox and Friends couch parading and lording over the military brass as the civilian head of our military. She cites the James Madison address to the Constitutional Convention in 1787, and citing to him, quote, a standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. This historical tradition, Judge Immergut writes, boils down to a simple proposition. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law. Defendants have made a range of arguments that, if accepted, risk blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation. She particularly talks about the fact that the military is not trained to protect the rights, civil liberties, civil rights of people on the streets. They're not trained to do law enforcement. They're not trained to de-escalate. They're not trained to do any of that. They're trained to take down and destroy an enemy. The lethality that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump like to talk about. It always concerns me, and I'm sure the judge too, when somebody like Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, what war are we at? War with the American people, says things like, we're going to be about total lethality, not technical legality. Well, okay. That sounds a lot like we're not going to comply with the law. So Judge Immergut, wrong judge for Donald Trump. Very interesting path. One of the most unique bodies of work I've ever seen before she became a federal judge. Very few candidates for federal judges are like state prosecutors and then federal prosecutors. And then she worked in Vermont for a period of time. I mean, she marches to the beat of her own drum. Yeah. Then she worked for the Department of Justice, as I said, U.S. attorney, but she also worked state prosecutions. She was the head of narcotics, and she was also the head of a narcotics enforcement when she was a prosecutor. She's currently on the FISA court, put there by John Roberts of the Chief Justice of the United States. She's on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. A very, very prestigious appointment for her. And she's not having it because, as she pointed out, in order for you to even come close to using the statute to take over the National Guard, and this is on page 17 of her order, you have to do it under a statute called 10 United States Code Section 12406. And these are the only ways that a president can take over a National Guard for a state. That the United States is invaded or is in danger of invasion by a foreign nation. Take that off the board. There is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. And she found there was no organized or armed rebellion at any time in Portland, certainly not at present. Anything that was the height of the problems in Portland were back in June and September, not now, not when he sent in the troops. And then finally, or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. And Trump tried to argue that there was a rebellion or danger of rebellion. She quickly rejected that. And secondly, that he's having difficulty executing his laws of the United States with his regular federal forces. And she said there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Portland has a task force for political violence. They meet regularly. Law enforcement knows what they're doing. She's a big supporter of law enforcement because she works so closely with them as a district attorney for this particular county. So she has like personal knowledge and understanding that comes into the mix of her decision. Now, Donald Trump gets this and decides, hey, I got an idea. Now we're back to he's operating like a 14-year-old as the Oregon Attorney General stated. Because he said, well, I'm going to send in 200 National Guard from California, right? I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll piss off the Democratic governor of Oregon, Governor Kotek, and I'll piss off Gavin Newsom, my arch political rival for the presidency. I'll use his National Guard to send to Oregon. Now, how can he do that? Because on the issue of the federalization of the National Guard, because it's so fact specific under that section 12406 that I just read you, that the Ninth Circuit did allow, over trial court's judge's rule, Judge Breyer, did allow the federalization of the National Guard in California for California, not to have them send them send them on the road like they're doing, like they're some sort of rock band, and we're going to send them to Oregon now under no facts in Oregon. This all reports to the same Court of Appeal, Oregon and California, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. And they're not going to be pleased that Donald Trump took a fact-specific ruling that related to the federalization of the National Guard in California, and then took that to mean he could take them to Oregon in violation of Judge Immergut and her decision that you can't nationalize the federal guard. If you can't nationalize the Oregon National Guard, you can't just do an end run around it by sending in another state's National Guard where the facts don't even support, again, any of these factors. You don't get a roving band of a standing army as a president. As Judge Immergut put, we're constitutional law, not martial law. And you got it backwards. So here's what's going to happen. State of Oregon is going to file an amended complaint while the appeal on this decision is up at the Ninth Circuit. Trump's going to ask for some sort of stay of the decision by Judge Immergut. She's going to reject it. They're going to go to the Ninth Circuit and ask for a stay to block our order. I don't think he's helping himself sending in California's guard to Oregon with the Ninth Circuit. And I think they reject the stay. Then Oregon files their amended complaint on Monday, Tuesday, later today, tomorrow. I'll cover it here and on Legal AF Substack. Come on over there, hit the free subscribe button and get my live reports for updates. Then on top of that, we will then have a new temporary restraining order. And I'm sure maybe some sort of argument that they have violated the Trump administration, the letter, if not the spirit, of the original temporary restraining order. Certainly, they're going to be going on a fast track for yet another temporary restraining order to ban Donald Trump from sending in any state's militia, any military into Oregon under the fact situation that's present. And we'll follow it all right here. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Get us to 1 million subscribers before the new year. That's our next goal. So until my next report, happy Monday. I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.